What every time you need, that's when I feel the most alone. Who don't you know that you're the one who makes this house a home? And so, when you go, it's so cold without a soul. You're the one who makes this house a home. Beautiful. Hello, guys. I hope you guys are doing extremely well. Happy to do another stream today. Today, I'll be working on something else. Today, I'll be writing a little bit, and after that, maybe I'll be watching some videos related to the courses that I'm doing right now. And I hope you guys enjoy. Let's go. So, for today will be very interesting because today I'll be seeking a lot about Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. I'll be seeking a lot about Friedrich Nietzsche today. I'll have to disconnect the mic. In every history, what every time you need leave, that's when I feel the most alone. Have you guys heard this new song? It's your and so when you go, it's so cold without a soul. You're the one who makes this house a home. It was you I was missing. In every history, but every time you leave, that's when I feel the most alone. Don't you know that you're the one who makes this house a home? And so, when you go, it's so cold without a soul. You're the one who makes this house a home. It was you I was missing. It was you I was missing. It was you I was missing. When I feel the most alone. Don't you know? Every time you it was you I was missing. When I feel the most alone. Don't you know? Every time you it was you I was missing. Okay, great. This stream is working. So, okay, guys, I'm going to show you my screen. That's when I feel the most alone. Okay, great. So today, I would like to be. Oh, don't you know? I hope you guys can see my screen. Yeah, I think you guys can see. Okay, great, beautiful. So, it's being replicated in infinite. So I was saying that today I'll be looking a little bit at Nietzsche. Nietzsche's will to power. There's something that I'm trying to look out there a pattern. So I think he probably wrote a book about the will to power. But I looked at the book is just too long, my friend. It's just too long. But I was trying to understand a little bit the structure though. The Will to Power book is a very thick book. It's very, very thick. But there is a part that I'm trying to understand a little bit. I'm trying to understand basically the idea that he had when talking about the will to power. Now there's two ways that I can do that. I can look at quotes directly where he mentions the will to power, and I can try to read the book also to try to understand it. But I think I'm going to go in this particular part, the will to power in nature. I think that I will read that one a little bit to try to see what was the aim, that what did Nietzsche had in mind. I remember last time I was reading something else about him, and he talked about the will to power. He also talked about the will to life. Now, there is one question that I'm asking myself, which is the will to power equal as the will to life? It was you I was missing. In every history, what every time you leave, that's when I feel the most alone. Don't you know that you're the one who makes this house a home? And so, god damn it, I'm not singing this song right. And so, when you go, it's so cold without a soul. You're the one who makes this house a home. Okay, Nietzsche holds that all of life is a manifestation of the will to power. He talked about the will to life. He talked about the will to power. Now, is the will to life that he was talking about the same as the will to power? This is what I'm trying to look out for. Let me look a little bit here. Let me look a little bit at this PDF too. Let me look at this Quora one. Hello chat. Yep. Guys, leave comments. Leave comments. Leave comments. You guys are welcome. Leave comments. Like, subscribe, share. Leave comment. Leave comment. Leave comments. I have a lot of energy today. Towards an understanding of Nietzsche's will to power. Those are some of his books. Now, apparently, this is one guy that actually really tried to read Nietzsche. Eh? If he's talking about all of this, or is it a thesis? Is this a thesis? Truth perspectivism, will of truth, will to power. Let me read this part a little bit. For those who just came, I have a question in here, and my question is, what was the essence of the will to power that Nietzsche was talking about? I'm trying to look for that. Following Nietzsche's reduction of the will to truth to a unifying will to power, one popular interpretation asserts the will to power to be a foundational and unifying claim about the nature of reality. Beautiful. That's one of the interpretation of the will to power. I call this view the metaphysical interpretation. In the sections which follow, I will explain its interpretation and then offer reasons why this reading of will to power fails to explain the concept in light of Nietzsche's broader philosophy. Let's go. The metaphysical interpretation is built primarily from Nietzsche's posthumous publications, both The Will to Power and his collection of notes known as that. It is through these works that Nietzsche makes sweeping metaphysical claims about the nature of reality, okay? For instance, we find life is will to power, and only so this one is he quoted it from the Will to Power book. Life is will to power, and the only reality is the will to grow stronger of every center of force, not self-preservation, but the will to appropriate, dominate, increase, grow stronger. Perhaps Nietzsche's most definitive account of the world as will to power was written in 1885. Was it not the same year when he also wrote The Antichrist? I think it was in 1885, just 4 years before the end of Nietzsche's creative life. And do you know what the world is to me? Shall I know you? Shall I know you? Shall I show you it in my mirror? This world, a monster of force, without beginning, without end, a fixed, iron quantity of force which grows neither larger nor smaller, which doesn't exhaust, but only transforms itself as a whole, unchanging in size, an economy without expenditure and losses, but equally without increase. This world is the will to power, and nothing besides. And you yourselves too are this will to power. Beautiful. Oh my God. Wow. I think that Nietzsche also saw it. This is a very nice way to put it, eh? And do you know what the world is to me? Shall I show you it in my mirror? This world, a monster of force, without beginning, without end, a fixed iron quantity of force, which grown neither larger nor smaller, which doesn't exhaust, but only transforms itself as a whole, unchanging in size, an economy without expenditure and losses, but equally without increase. This world is the will to power and nothing besides, and you yourselves too are this will to power. He's talking like Jesus Christ. You know, when Jesus Christ is saying that you guys are the kingdom of God is within you. This is basically the same thing. He sees it. He saw it. Here, Nietzsche presents what appears to be a metaphysical speculation about the nature of reality. For Nietzsche, nature itself is a monster of force or power which is not infinite, but rather spatially finite. Now, where no, this is no. How do we read this? Nowhere or nowhere. Now here. Now nowhere. I thought that it should be separated. No here. Now here. Nowhere, sorry. Guys, I think that this word is supposed to be read uh nowhere. I think it is. Was it supposed to have? Were they supposed to have? Were they supposed to have a space separating the two? I think they were supposed to have a space separating the two. Nowhere. I don't know how do we write that. And what if I had to write? Maybe I use it one of those days. Nowhere. That's how we write it, huh? How do we pronounce that even? Pronunciation. Nowhere. Nowhere. God damn it. God damn it.
Nowhere.
God damn it. Alright, nowhere. And what's the meaning of nowhere? What's the meaning of that? Is this one separated? Alright, it's nowhere. Nowhere in this universe is there empty space, but everywhere centers of power, constantly competing to sublimate and expand their power over one another. Time itself, perceived as circular and eternally repeating, this world viewed as eternally self-creating, eternally self-destroying, eternally recurring, with its creative and destructive tendencies resting fundamentally on nothing other than a will to power. Thus comes the ultimate reduction. This world is the will to power and nothing besides. Martin Heidegger is the first scholar to introduce the metaphysical interpretation of will to power. Building from Nietzsche's unpublished notes, he argues Nietzsche's philosophy proper, the fundamental position on the basis of which he speaks in these and all the writings he himself published, did not assume a final form and was not itself published in any book. Let me read this again. Nietzsche's philosophy proper, the fundamental position on the basis of which he speaks in these and in all the writings he himself published, did not assume a final form and was not itself published in any book. Why just not say that he didn't publish the whole the explanation of the idea in the book? It's like sometimes philosophers did use just a lot of words just to say something that's pretty simple. What Nietzsche himself published during his creative life was always foreground. As Heidegger views it, the expression will to power designates the basic character of beings. Any being which is, insofar as it is will to power. This is the view of Heidegger. Okay, this is how Heidegger understood this. Let me take some notes on about this a little bit. This is the interpretation of Heidegger. Do I think that Heidegger did get it right? But I think, this thing that Nietzsche, where was it? This thing of Nietzsche is, I can say, a proof. This is a proof that the guy knew the shit he was talking about. I think he knew. But this is an assumption. Let me try to see if he has also seen it too. Okay. Will to power. That's the place where he got that. Okay, here Nietzsche presents what appears to be. He presents what appears to be. Oh no, I read this already. I'm supposed to be here. This is interpretation of Heidegger. Thus, for Heidegger, the will to power marks the fundamental nature of beings as becoming, as it explains the constant flux and chaotic struggle that is existence. Now, this is Heidegger. He just took one aspect of what Nietzsche is actually trying to say. What Nietzsche is saying is much more deeper, and I think that he connects pretty well with Lao Tzu, the one who wrote Tao Te Ching. He connects. I think Nietzsche in here, this way, the way that he shows in here is basically the same thing that Lao Tzu also was talking about. And do you know what the world is to me? Shall I know you? Shall I show you it in my mirror? This world, if monster of force without beginning, without end, a fixed iron quantity of force which shown neither larger nor smaller, which doesn't exhaust but only transforms itself as a whole, unchanging in size and economy without expenditure and losses, but equally without increase. This world is the will to power and nothing besides. And you yourselves too are this will to power and nothing besides. Now, this is basically the same thing. Let's take a look a little bit at what Lao Tzu wrote. He wrote that fucking book that we called Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching. Now, let's get into the book. Let's get into the fucking book. Tao Te Ching. The version of Charles Muller. Charles Muller, he seems to be. What the hell? Charles Muller seems to be the first version. Huh? I don't know if it is the first version or not. You know, I prefer reading the versions of books. You know, I prefer reading the first translations of books. First, second, the ones that come afterwards, we say, oh, new international translation. Is the same thing that they did with the Bible. The Bible, you have King James version, right? And then you have all other types of translations that came, and then you see sometimes in the translation the actual meaning of the words that are being taken away. I think Charles Muller wasn't bad. I think. Let's go look. Oh, I think this is the one, right? The one with the Chinese characters. It also talks about the way. He calls it the Tao. But he does also a same type of description. Same type of description as Nietzsche's type of description. Same type. Let's look at one description when he's talking about the way. In every history, whatever time you leave, that's when I feel the most alone. Don't you know that you're the one who makes this house a home? And so, when you go, so cold without us, you're the one who makes this house a home. It was you I was missing. In every history. This is a description of the way, but I see it It's not really like the one that I'm seeking for. It's also a description of the way. This is another type. This is another one which is pretty close to what Nietzsche is describing. Let's go back to what Nietzsche is describing first. Um, Here's the one, and he says, "And do you know what the world is to me? Shall I show you it in my mirror? This world, a monster of force, without beginning, without end, a fixed iron quantity of force, which grown neither larger nor smaller, which doesn't exhaust, but only transforms itself as a whole, unchanging in size, an economy without expenditure and losses, and but equally without increase. This world is the will to power, and nothing besides, and you yourselves too are this will to power." Now let's go and look at what Lao Tzu says here. The great wave flows over, spreading in every direction. The myriad things are produced, relying on it, but it does not distinguish them. It brings them to completion without claiming possession. It clothes and feeds all things without lording over them. Okay, this is the one. Always desireless, it can be called the small. The myriad things rely on it, and it doesn't true to rule them. Thus, it can be called great till the end. It does not regard itself as great, therefore it is able to be great. This is one description of it. The way is always not doing, yet there is nothing it doesn't do. If the rulers are were able to embody it, everyone will naturally be changed. Being changed, they desire to do things. So I must restrain them using the nameless uncarved block. Let me see. Is there not any other description of the way in here? Okay. Return is the motion of the way. Softening is its function. All things in the cosmos arise from being. Being arises from non-being. Don't you know that you're the one who makes this house a home? And so, when you go, it's so cold without a soul. You're the one who makes this house a home. Mm. This is a very interesting one that I can take. Ah. Which chapter is this? Chapter 65. Okay, here's another one. And after this one, I think let's get back again to what Nietzsche is saying. And so, where is that? Here is it. And do you know what the world is to me? Shall I show you it in my mirror? This world, a monster of force without beginning, without end, a fixed iron quantity of force which grown neither larger nor smaller, which doesn't exhaust but only transforms itself as a whole, unchanging in size and economy, without expenditures and losses, but equally without increase. This world is the will to power and nothing besides, and you yourselves too are this will to power. Let's come back here. The reason everybody calls my way great is because there is nothing quite like it. It is exactly because it is great that there is nothing quite like it. If there were something that were consistently like it, how could it be small? What he means is that the way is also small, right? Now, I won't be reading the other ones, but this is there's a connection. I think Nietzsche and Lotz were talking here about the same thing, but let's try to keep to push forward. I think that I was able to get already some data out of this. Let's push a little bit. Martin Heidegger is the first scholar to introduce the metaphysical. Okay, he gave his interpretation here. Likewise, the metaphysical interpretation finds further evidence through other passages indicating a sort of metaphysical reductionism. Reductionism. For instance, Nietzsche argues all events that result from intention are reducible to the intention to increase power. Likewise, our intellect, our will, likewise our feelings are all dependent on our valuation. These correspond to our drives and the conditions of their existence. Our drives can be reduced to the will to power. Here is a man who actually saw it. He saw that. Interesting. That is Nietzsche. This is another book. What's the name? What's this name? What's that name? LN. I saw it from the very beginning, right? LN. What book was that? What book was that? Writings from the late notebooks. Late notebooks, yeah. Okay, Nietzsche suggests here that all aim-driven behaviors, whether conscious or unconscious, are reducible to an expression or manifestation of the will to power. Absolutely. Here, will to power serves as unifying principle behind all organic and inorganic beings, yes, and their functions. As Nietzsche views it, it is the will to power that guides the inorganic world as well. Action at a distance cannot be eliminated. Something draws, something else closer, something feels drawn. This is the fundamental fact. Compared to this, the mechanistic notion of pressing and pushing is merely a hypothesis based on sight and touch, even if it does indeed serve us as a regulative hypothesis for the world of sight. It is the will to power that guides the inorganic world as well. Action as at a distance cannot. I think this document seems to be well written. It is the will to power that guides the inorganic world as well. Okay, action at the distance cannot be eliminated. Something draws, something else closer, something feels drawn. This is the fundamental fact. Compared to this, The mechanistic notion of pressing and pushing is merely a hypothesis based on sight and touch, even if it does indeed serve us as a regulative hypothesis for the world of sight. Here's a very interesting thing. They say that more recently scholars have focused on a cluster of terms Nietzsche associates with will to power, power quanta, okay? Centers, force. There's also the will to life. Okay, this one is taken from Beyond Good and Evil. If we assume that nothing is given as real other than our world of desires and passions, and that we cannot access from above or below any reality other than the direct reality of our drives, in the end the question is whether we acknowledge the will as something really efficient, whether we believe in the causal properties of the will. If we do, then we must make the attempt to set up hypothetically the causality of the will as the single causality. Suppose, finally, that we were to succeed in explaining our entire instinctual life as a development and branching off of a single fundamental form of the will, that is, of the will to power, as my principle asserts, and suppose we could trace back all organic functions to this will to power, then in so doing, we would have earned the right to designate all efficient force unambiguously as will to power. Seen from inside, the world defined and described according to its intelligible character will be simply will to power and nothing else. This is a very interesting one. Very interesting one. When I'm looking at this, it reinforces the fact that I think that Nietzsche also has seen it. Nietzsche has also seen it. Let me look a little bit at the chat. Hello guys, you guys are welcome. You guys are welcome. You guys can leave out comments. Great. Yeah, this is the only published aphorism in which the will is expressed. Okay, like WP, this aphorism encapsulates the metaphysical interpretation. Nietzsche develops a metaphysical hypothesis about the nature of reality. Here, everything in the world is reduced to a single fundamental form of the will to power. At bottom, this seems to suggest that the will to power becomes an explanatory tool for the intelligible character to understand the world. Yet, this is the only published aphorism in which the will the will in expressed in these terms, or this is the only published aphorism in which the will is expressed in these terms. Okay, yes. If this is the only one, then I might take that one to read it again afterwards. But I think that this is a proof that he had also saw it also as well, beyond good and evil. Now, great. Now, this book, it has different chapters towards the understanding of nature's will to power. Interesting. Jeffrey Beery, is he a professor? Is he a professor? Or is he a teacher? This looks like an article. Undergraduate honors program. Thesis. Was that a thesis? A doctorate thesis. The man is not known. Unknown. Error. Syntax error. Mm-hmm. It was a thesis. Is that will as will to power, psychology of the will to power. Interesting. In every history, it's very interesting. The will to power as a metaphor. Okay, let's go to the 32. Page 32. I think this thesis is interesting. He did take a lot of. He did take the different points, the different places where Nietzsche talked about the will to power, and he did put them all together. Page 32. Okay, having canvassed the will to power under metaphysical interpretation and resultantly having refuted that interpretation, it is important that we now move towards an analysis of another popular interpretation of the will to power, what I call the metaphorical interpretation. Following Wayne Klein, the metaphorical interpretation maintains that the will to power does not name the essence of nature, but is one way among others of describing nature, a form of description that Nietzsche recognizes as explicitly metaphorical. To better understand the basis for this interpretation, it is essential that we acquaint ourselves with Nietzsche's views regarding science, perspectivism, and art. Why? To try to understand the terms you are looking into: science, perspectivism, and art. Why? If Nietzsche if Nietzsche was using that term to represent everything from which nature is coming, if you try to understand nature or his views about nature, then you understand his point of view about the will. That's what you mean? Given Nietzsche's philosophical skepticism and anti-metaphysical position, it is perhaps no surprise that Nietzsche viewed 19th century mechanistic science with great disdain. In The Gay Science, for example, Nietzsche argues that the 19th century is the most stupid of all interpretations of the world, in that it refuses the world to purely it reduces the world to purely mechanical functions, which makes the world essentially meaningless. Perhaps more importantly, Nietzsche claims that science is itself nothing other than interpretation. It does not offer an ontological account of nature. This same reduction is made in greater scope in Beyond Good and Evil. Here, Nietzsche responds to the physicists' belief in nature, conformity to law, as Nietzsche views it. As Nietzsche views it, let me take back again from here. I lost a little bit. Here, Nietzsche responds to the physicists' belief in nature, conformity to law. Like believing that something can't be changed, right? As Nietzsche As Nietzsche views it, such a belief is grounded not in objective foundations, but rather subjective prejudices. It is no matter of fact, no text, but only a naively humanitarian emendation and perversion of meaning. This connotes that there is no objective explanation for reality, but rather only descriptions of interpretations of reality. Or, as Nietzsche puts it, I would say no fact is precisely what there is not. No facts is precisely what there is not, only interpretations. We cannot establish any fact in itself. Perhaps it is folly to do such a thing. Okay? We cannot establish any fact in itself. Perhaps it is a folly to do such a thing. So basically, his point of view in regards to science wasn't the same that the scientists will take as, okay, if I'm looking at a law about reality, then that law is immutable, it can't be changed. So here, what Nietzsche is trying to criticize is the fact that scientists have they at one point in time is like their mind is just so rigid, it doesn't change anymore. Basically, that's what he is trying to criticize in here, and he is saying, I mean, he is giving all of those interpretations that all the facts, no fact is precisely what there is not, only interpretations. We cannot establish any fact in itself. Perhaps it is a folly to do such a thing. Okay. And he says such a view is in accordance with Nietzsche's epistemic perspectivism, which, as we recall, maintains that all evaluation is made from a definite perspective. So that nothing is objectively determined. Totally agree. But is rather a projection of structure and order which describe or interpret empirical experiences. I think this is a nice one. This is the nice one. That's why in the world we need to have different type. I mean, we need to have people that can bring a different take on a particular topic. So if we are to raise a question, we need people, different types of people, to come together and bring their own answers. Basically, that's what is it's being put. That's what is being put in here. That's the whole idea of what Nietzsche is doing here. But this one, that I don't think that I should take this one because it doesn't go with my goal. Okay. I think it was smart, huh? I think it was smart what the guy did in here. In order to understand what Nietzsche was talking about, he looks at he looks at his views in science, perspectivism, and art. That was smart. That's smart. This emphasis on interpretation places Nietzsche in a position to present his own interpretation of the world. As he argues, somebody might come along who, with opposite intentions and modes of interpretation, could read out the same nature and with regard to the same phenomena, rather than the tyrannically inconsiderate and relentless enforcement of claims of power. Now, what Nietzsche is saying basically here is that he may have seen something, and then he sees that another person sees the same thing, and then the person comes up with a different type of interpretation. Now, I can link that with what we were just reading about Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu and Nietzsche were talking about the same thing, but from a different perspective. I mean, same types of explanations, but what Lao Tzu calls the way is probably what Nietzsche also calls the will to power. Let's continue. We'll finish. Once again, this interpretation will not designate facts that obtain in a metaphysically transcendent world. Rather, it will serve as a description of the world of experience through a particular perspectival scene. In this regard, some scholars have interpreted Nietzsche's will to power as metaphorical, in that it too is an interpretation and artistic creation. It definitely is. For instance, Klein maintains that given Nietzsche's perspectivism, the same set of phenomena is open to a multiplicity of diverse, even mutually exclusive interpretations. The will to power is therefore not the fundamental basis and explanation of all reality, but rather one interpretation amongst many that attempts to account for the empirical experiences we encounter in everyday life. That's a nice sentence. Further support of the will to power as a metaphorical doctrine can be found in Nietzsche's account of art. Nietzsche argues that the existence of the world is only justified as an aesthetic phenomenon. The word only is of major importance here, as it once again suggests that Nietzsche rejects essentialists' positions that view the phenomenon of the world as objectively explainable. Instead, Nietzsche argues that only through artistic creation can humanity posit intrinsic value into the world. Nietzsche argues that only through artistic creation can humanity posit intrinsic value into the world. Now, this reminds me of one idea of Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky says that beauty shall save the world. This passage also shows the connection between Nietzsche's perspectivism and his account of art. Each perspective is unique in that it is artistically constructed by an individual observer. Although some perspectives may merge and share common ground among one another, each can only be understood through the eyes of the individual artist or observer. Take, for example, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. We can all rejoice in this prestigious display of musical talent. However, we may each interpret the piece differently, attributing to it a certain meaning and status which cannot be entirely understood by others of the same listening group. Similarly, Nietzsche's perspectivism suggests that at bottom we construct the world through background theories, whether they're religious, philosophical, or scientific in nature. Such constructions demonstrate our own unique artistic impulses as we actively interpret our experiences. For Nietzsche, this artistic impulse plays a central role in the development of prominent world interpretations. As discussed in chapter 1, Nietzsche treats God as an illusion, an artistic creation imposed upon the world to inject a sense of structure, purpose, and unity to human existence. Like the scientific worldview, this religious ideal is the one interpretation among many that attempts to describe the world. The problem Nietzsche points out, however, is that adherents to these worldviews begin to believe in themselves, holding their interpretation to be the interpretation in which all other interpretations will be judged. This is a very wonderful point. In this sense, these interpretations begin to hold what is merely illusion to be fact, and for Nietzsche, this misconception is life-negating. Hence, Nietzsche regards the truths exposed under the God hypothesis to be dangerous to life and argues that we should ultimately reject this interpretation. The same rejection is taking place above regarding science. Rather than to cling to a dogmatic picture of science, Nietzsche recommends a gay, joyful, scientific approach that is experimental and open ended. To do so, Nietzsche suggests we go back to the drawing board and reconstruct a worldview that offers intrinsic value and affirms this life. The picture that Nietzsche paints is will to power. Will to power is thus not only an artistic interpretation, illusion, or useful fiction similar to the scientific and religious theories criticized above, it is also a central metaphor that formulates part of Nietzsche's philosophical response to the death of God, recalling the parable of the madman, which Nietzsche writes, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. We have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What festival of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? For Nietzsche, this festival of atonement, this sacred game that we must invent, is will to power. I agree with that. The will to power becomes part of Nietzsche's perspective that helps to formulate his active nihilism, whereby one can affirm life in a godless world. Now I hear people are missing the point. I think he is missing the point in here. You know, as I'm reading this, now I understand why Nietzsche wrote God is dead. That guy, he saw it. Nietzsche saw it. Nietzsche saw it, but what I can't what I can't understand is how did he come to live the life that he lived, having understood and having seen. It's a mystery to me. Like, I don't understand. How can you see and still not make it now? Or he became a witness. I don't know why. I don't know why. Did he not believe in it? But here, this is a great article, by the way. This is a great thesis. I think it's great. If written metaphorically, the will to power can be understood in a variety of ways. First, the will to power can be understood as an existential imperative which promotes human overcoming and life affirmation. Okay, in this way, the will to power could easily be associated with Nietzsche's notion of active nihilism, the eternal recurrence, and the Übermensch. Okay, it can be associated with that. But that active nihilism. Next, the will to power could be what does it call active nihilism? You can't take away and come back to what we were. Baby, you know that's not how this works. No, that's not how this works. No, 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 no. And that's not how this works. No, that's not how this works. No. Why? Tell me why? You can just make up your mind. You're messing with my head. Against this tendency, Nietzsche recommended active nihilism, which openly acknowledges the lack of meaning and uses its negative force to dismantle established values. I don't think that. Perhaps that's where Nietzsche fucked up a little bit. that's where I think that's where Nietzsche fucked up a little bit. Ha. Nietzsche's case is just so sad when I'm thinking about it. His case is sad. Let's go back. Okay, I totally agree with that, but he's the active nihilism. I don't go with that. I think Nietzsche saw it. He saw it, but I don't know what happened afterwards. Wait, um, this thing that I was looking at again, where he talked about that description that he gave. We assume Beyond Good and Evil. When did he write Beyond Good and Evil? He he wrote that it in 1886. Mm. 1886 he writes Beyond Good and Evil. And now, when did he write The Antichrist? Oh, The Antichrist. Nietzsche. When did he write that one? Nah, it was published. Then he wrote that in 1888. Now, I'm asking myself the question, did he talk about the will to power? Did Nietzsche talk about the will to power? And did he talk about the will to power in The Antichrist? I think here maybe that's when that's where AI might help. What's the name of that guy again? Chat GPT. Chat GPT. GPT chat. Hello chat. Anyone in here? Got two viewers. Beep, 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 beep. I hope you guys are enjoying. I hope you guys are enjoying the moment. For Chat GPT, the question that I was supposed to ask is okay, collect all the references of will to power, all the references of will to power in Nietzsche's book, The Antichrist. Baby, why Ash? I wrote all with one L. In The Antichrist, Friedrich Nietzsche does not discuss the will to power in many scattered places. The explicit phrase appears only a few times, but the concept structures much of the book's argument against Christianity. Yes. Mm, where the will of power is lacking, there is decline. Nothingness deified, the will to nothingness sanctified. It is crazy, huh? Nietzsche the Antichrist. I think that I have the book in here. Uh, You can't walk away and come back to what we were. Normally, I think that I have the Antichrist of Nietzsche. I think I have it. Was it in my tab? I placed that somewhere. Cause that's not what you mean. You can't walk away. I don't have the Antichrist here. I don't think. I don't think I have it. I don't have it. I don't have it. But I think the Antichrist was the last book that Nietzsche wrote. Nietzsche died in 1888. Mm. Rectification. He was dead in 18. He was dead in. How do we say this in English? 19. In 19. He was born in 1900. 1900. 1900. Great. So, what was the last book that he wrote? This is what I said. The last book. Last original book written by him before his death. Okay, it's a Homo. That's not how this works, Friedrich Nietzsche. Get messing with my head. You can't walk away and come back to what we were. How many pages is that? Ichio Homo is his biography. So the last one that he wrote, it was his autobiography. Ah, guys, I don't want to hide to you the fact that I would like to understand more about the life of Nietzsche, the way he lived. I would really like to understand that, but the way that I've seen so far is not really interesting to me. All of those are poems. The Wanderer. So the last book apparently is about him. I think this one makes me see a little bit how he was. I think it should be a very interesting one, huh? This it's a Homo, but it's a long one too. It's a long book. It's a long book, and as you know with Nietzsche, There's nothing that is superficial with him. Words of Lou Salome. Music by Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche was a musician? Okay, let's go. What did he? Well, so truly loves a friend, his friend, as I love thee. Life mystery. Life mystery. If joy or grief to hidden, joy or grief to joy or grief, send me out loud. Blah, 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 blah. Laugh or else weep. I'm bidden. Nietzsche's autobiography. This seems, I think, if I were to look a little bit at it, I may have a better understanding of Nietzsche's life. Perhaps I may have a better understanding. I think that for today, I'm going to cut in here, but I've been able to get some good datas already from this document. I've been able to get some datas. Where is it? This document. I've been able to get. Let me finish with that one first. I was here. In this way, the will to power could easily be associated with Nietzsche's notion of active nihilism, the eternal recurrence, and the Übermensch. Next, the will to power could be offered as another description among many of the way in which the world operates. This is the view most closely associated with Klein above. Interestingly, however, if treated metaphorically, the will to power can be understood under either reading and still be justified under that given perspective. It is unclear which reading Nietzsche himself would support, but the text suggests evidence for both treatments. Great. Here's another one. Metaphysics, morality, religion, science. In this book, these things merit consideration only as various forms of lies. With their help, one can have faith in life. Life ought to inspire confidence. The task thus imposed is tremendous. To solve it, man must be a liar by nature. He must be above all an artist. And he is one. Metaphysics, religion, morality, science, all of them only products of his will to art. In those moments in which man was deceived, in which he duped himself, in which he believes in life, oh, how enraptured he feels. What delight, what a feeling of power. Man has once again become master of material. In those moments in which man was deceived, in which he duped himself, in which he believes in life, oh, how enraptured he feels, what delight, what a feeling of power. Man has once again become master of material, master of truth. And whenever man rejoices, he is always the same in his rejoicing. He rejoices as an artist. He enjoys himself as power. He enjoys the lie as his form of power. This passage suggests, I think this objection seems very interesting. Let me see how this guy is interpreting it. Although a metaphorical reading of the will to power is compatible with Nietzsche's epistemic perspectivism, active nihilism, and the overman, we still find adequate reason to reject it as the preferred account. There are two central reasons underlying this rejection. First, the metaphorical interpretation lacks textual support throughout Nietzsche's writings. Earlier in this chapter, we criticized the metaphysical interpretation for relying too heavily on Nietzsche's unpublished material. We find a similar, although more acute, problem with the metaphorical interpretation of the will to power. Here, the interpretation is hindered by the fact that Nietzsche offers little to no published or unpublished aphorisms that directly connect will to power to an illusion or a metaphorical idea about reality. Okay? In fact, only one aphorism is frequently cited as textual evidence: Beyond Good and Evil 22. Klein takes this aphorism as definitive for understanding the will to power, suggesting that the hypothetical proposition suggests a metaphorical or fictional presentation of the concept. However, not only is this aphorism inconclusive with its treatments of the will to power, we find no further support for a metaphorical interpretation in the other detailed discussions of the will to power of the will to power throughout Beyond Good and Evil. With this lack of textual support, the metaphorical interpretation relies on an inference to the best explanation. Given Nietzsche's account to science, perspectivism, and art, one infers that the will to power is best understood metaphorically. Okay? Agree with that? However, a similar inference can be formulated to reject this position, given the fact that Nietzsche fails to discuss the will to power explicitly as a metaphorical notion, and that resultantly we lack sufficient evidence for supporting such an interpretation. We can infer that a metaphorical reading is incorrect. Once again, we cannot use a single aphorism as adequate support for one of Nietzsche's most central philosophical positions. Second, the metaphorical interpretation misinterprets Nietzsche's account of the artist and art, a note which retroactively reflects upon the birth of tragedy, expresses clearly Nietzsche's mature thoughts on art and its connections with the will to power. Metaphysics, morality, religion, science, in this book, these things merit consideration only as various forms of lies. With their help, one can have faith in life. Life ought to inspire confidence. The task thus imposed is tremendous. To solve it, man must be a liar by nature. He must be above all an artist, and he is one. Metaphysics, religion, morality, science, all of them only products of his will to art. In those moments in which man was deceived, in which he duped himself, in which he believes in life, oh, how enraptured he feels, what delight, what a feeling of power. Man has once again become master of material, master of truth. And whenever man rejoices, he is always the same in his rejoicing. He rejoices as an artist. He enjoys himself as power. He enjoys the lie as his form of power, his will to power. This is a very interesting one. I think that I need to take it also a little bit. I may take this one also. Consider this seriously. Okay, this passage suggests that Nietzsche views the will to power not as a work of art or as a perspectival description of reality, but rather as a fundamental human drive. For Nietzsche, metaphysics, morality, religion, and science are all expressions of a will to art, which, as Nietzsche argues, is merely a manifestation of the will to power. Yes. As such, the will to power is the source of the aesthetic phenomena that aim to justify life, whether that is God, metaphysics, religion, or tragedy in the case of the Greeks. Now, this is what the guy is saying in here. I agree with that. This claim is to be understood as empirical in nature. For Nietzsche, each perspective shares the commonality of its thirst for power. For after all, a living thing seeks above all to discharge its strength. At bottom, each perspective is a different expression or manifestation of will to power. Here we can have an objective basis of the perspectival theory of knowledge which safeguards Nietzsche's position from a devastating contradiction. For these reasons, it is plausible that the will to power serves a more robust role in Nietzsche's philosophy than an illusory concept similar to those which he so often argues against. Instead, will to power could be fundamental to understanding the human condition generally, being utilized as an explanatory tool for all human drives and behaviors. Beautiful. Oh, oh, man, this is great. I think a lot of the things now I have a better idea of what Nietzsche was talking or was referring when he was looking at will to power. Better idea. Let's look at this. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche both agreed on the conatus, the innate tendency of all living things to maintain and enhance existence, the will to live. They both believed in the will to live. They both also believed that we have the primary motivation of the will to live to enhance our power to live. What they disagreed on is the best way for us to endure and maximize the will to live that controls us all. Schopenhauer said there were aesthetic behaviors we should practice to endure the will to live, because he thought life was bad. That's where a lot of people fuck up, fuck most of the time. Believe that life is bad, and that our goal should be to deny the will to live. He said it's better not to be born. A true sage. Oh, every time I'm always saying sage instead of sage. I think at one point I might actually use sage, because to me, when I'm listening sage instead of sage, feels much more attractive, much more interesting. A true sage would live as a Catholic, self-sacrificing saint or a Buddhist monk in poverty and humility, not that Schopenhauer himself practiced the denial of the will to live. I think Schopenhauer here was wrong. I personally think he was wrong. He was wrong because he was looking at one aspect of life. I'm not saying that those guys that are living like that are wrong. It's that they're just looking at one aspect of life. What is the opinion of Nietzsche? Nietzsche had a different advocacy on what we should do to maximize our life as humans, controlled by the will to live. Nietzsche thought we should maximize our power to live by being heroic power seekers. We should transcend and perfect the self through the possession and exercise of creative power. Life is simply the will to power, according to Nietzsche. I think Nietzsche was much more right than Schopenhauer. This is very interesting, huh? You see, those are the greatest philosophers. Greatest philosophers. They came into a conclusion. But yet, the conclusions create two separate sides. You see, there were a lot of men who, after reading Nietzsche, did things that weren't pretty okay. You see, like for example, I think that Hitler was influenced by Nietzsche. It's very easy to misunderstand Nietzsche, but I think that Nietzsche saw it. I think if you read Nietzsche wrong, according to, okay, let's take a look at this. Adolf Hitler personally owned an extensive collection of books, not including books he bought for the German state. Nazi politicians claimed that Hitler had about 6,000 volumes and that he had read each one. Okay, no record. Okay, although contemporaries say that Hitler loved reading works by German authors, Friedrich Nietzsche in particular, according to Ambros Mikolci, there is no sign of Goethe, Schiller, Dante, Schopenhauer, or Nietzsche in his library. Okay? Although it is possible that some of these could have been destroyed by Allied bombing, he is said to have believed that William Shakespeare was far superior to Goethe and Schiller. He had a copy of George Müller translation of Shakespeare's collected works. Mm. Now, there is no evidence that that Hitler was influenced by Nietzsche. There's no evidence. Hmm. I think that this man point is valid. This guy's point is valid. It's very, very, very easy to misunderstand Nietzsche. Very, extremely easy. Great. Let me look at this one. Nietzsche, the Will to Power. What is this article about? Those are the ones that I did open afterwards. Now I have to close this. I have to close this as well. As well. As well. As well. In Nietzsche's book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, there are three major teachings Zarathustra has to offer: the will to power, the conception of the eternal recurrence, and the advocacy of the Overman or Übermensch. Übermensch. In this post, we will explore the meaning behind the will to power. This is. Huh? Is it not the same one that I read? Willpower and metaphysics, willpower and psychology, willpower versus will to live. I think this is an article that I will read afterwards. I'll read that one afterwards. So I'm keeping it. The other one, great, great. Let's come back to chat, guys. I'll have to go and eat a little bit. I hope you guys liked this small stream, and I'll be seeing you guys afterwards. See you guys. Bye bye. Stop streaming.